What's up, everybody? Of course, my name is Matty Willz, and we're back with another episode of Wellbeing Wednesday with Matty Willz, brought to you by the good people over at Metro Health. Without further ado, we'll bring in today's guest, the one and only Dr. Armstrong-Brine, and today we'll be talking about things related to autism, and we'll dive into that in just a little bit. So first and foremost, Dr. Armstrong-Brine, thank you for joining us today,
Thank you for
and we
having
hope
me.
that, yeah, for sure. Hope your morning is going well so far. How you doing? Go ahead.
No, I'm doing good. I'm waiting for this sunshine. It's sunny in Cleveland. That is a great start to any day, in my opinion.
Yeah, as my wife often reminds me, we just got to kind of weed through these cold days that'll be popping up undoubtedly over the next couple of weeks. Hopefully, it doesn't
Yes.
take too long. But again, thank you so much for joining us. We know that all of you guys are super busy,
Mhm.
but the information that we put out is definitely super important as well. So today we'll be talking about autism and things surrounding that. I do want to point out to our viewers and our our social media followers, if this video, if this subject touches you in any way, or if you feel like you need to pass it on to somebody that you know or love, please feel free to do that. And of course, we'll leave you with some contact information towards the end. All right. I do like Dr. Armstrong-Brine to allow you all the opportunity, though, just to, ingratiate yourselves with our audience. Tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are with Metro, what your journey's been like.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do that. So actually, I am from Missouri originally, believe it or not. So I grew up actually on right outside of St. Louis on the Illinois side of Missouri, and went to school and did my graduate school in St. Louis at St. Louis University. I then went briefly to Oklahoma City and then back to Missouri. Where in 2014, I was actually recruited then to come to Metro Health to start the autism program here. And I was really excited to get that opportunity because one, I just loved the people. Everybody's so friendly and devoted to caring for patients. And two, I really love the mission. And so my goal since I've been here has really been to work with a wonderful team of people to build a culturally sensitive autism assessment clinic and autism services at Metro Health. So that's what brings me to this point today.
Perfect. And that makes you a perfect person to answer these questions that we have for you all today. So we'll just hop right into that. Okay. So
Mhm,
we'll start with what is autism? What is autism spectrum disorder? And what are
mhm.
behaviors that parents should watch out for?
That's a great question. So, autism spectrum disorder is first and foremost what we consider to be a developmental or neurodevelopmental condition. And what that means is that we know that there's changes in the way that the brain works that is behind autism. Okay. The CDC recently has told us that 1 in 36 kids in the United States has autism spectrum disorder, and there's about 5 million adults with autism spectrum disorder. So it's a huge number of people, right, that are impacted. And, there's a lot of kind of controversy, I think, around the autism spectrum disorder diagnosis because there's a lot of people who are just a little bit different, and neurodiversity is definitely a thing and something that I'm a big champion for. But when we're talking about autism spectrum disorder, we're really talking about kids that have difficulties in two big areas. The first one is social communication. And the second one are these kind of restricted and repetitive behaviors that impact them. And the key here for something to be a disorder is that it has to negatively impact your life. It has to be causing something to be difficult for you, whether it be school or making friends or going out in the community. Okay.
Mm.
So things that parents can look for, everyday life kind of things. So when I'm thinking about the communication stuff, I'm actually thinking a little bit about communication non-verbally, so eye contact. And this can be anything from, not looking at people when you interact to kind of that looking intensely, like if you've ever met anybody that you almost feel like stares through you, like that kind of
Mhm.
intense kind of eye contact. Needing a lot of prompting to use gestures like waving or pointing, things that we oftentimes expect kids to do kind of naturally pretty early, might need a lot of prompting or work for individuals with autism. And then language, not so much not talking at all, but anything from any range of like verbal communication difficulties that interferes with like that back and forth flow. So this can be anything from not talking to kind of talking incessantly and so much using big words that it's not really clear to other people what they're talking about. And then also difficulties kind of with social interactions. So things like not being able to take turns in play, not understanding that, that other kids might break the rules when you play, but if you're breaking the rules too, like you got to let it go, those kind of things.
Right.
And then from the behavior side, this can be anything from kind of unusual motor behaviors that show up. So things like flapping their hands or flicking their fingers, to playing with toys in unusual ways. So like stacking and lining up things repeatedly. Also, difficulties with change or not liking things to be different even when they need to be. And then some sensory differences are also pretty common. So things like looking at things really closely to their face, holding them up to their eyes or from the corner of their eyes, maybe putting things or pressing things against their face a lot. Those kind of things can be signs of autism too.
Wow, and obviously you just explained to us that you are a specialist in this area, but that goes a lot to what your answer was, because not everything fits into one box all the time, right? So
Right.
when we're talking about things like such as autism, the answer can be many different things, or a combination of things. So I appreciate you going into depth on that. So what are some of the stigmas associated with this condition, as well as biases within the Black community?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great and important question. I love it. So the first thing that I hear a lot from parents, and that I want to make sure is clear, is that autism and intellectual disability, so not being able to learn as quickly as other people, maybe having difficulty thinking through everyday problems, is not autism spectrum disorder. Okay. Some people with autism have intellectual disability, but a lot of people do not. And I think there's this misbelief that if you have autism, you can't be smart or you can't do well in school. And that is just absolutely not true. Okay. The other one I think that we see a lot, or we hear a lot, is that kids with autism don't want friends or don't want relationships with people. And that is so entirely true. Untrue. Sorry, as I mess up. What I will tell you is that people with autism oftentimes really, really desire friendships. They desire a connection with other people. But what they find is that they have trouble reading kind of emotions. They don't necessarily understand what other people want from them. And a lot of times they feel misunderstood in social situations. So having people around you who are willing to support you and really kind of meet you where you're at is really important for people with autism, because they do want connection with people. And then the last one that I think is really common is, I mentioned it a little bit before, but is this idea of not talking. So I think when a lot of people think about autism, they think about people that aren't verbal, who sit in the corner and maybe rock or like look at their hands but don't interact with other people. That's really a very severe form of the condition, okay? Like the most severe, and something you don't really see all that often. Individuals with autism can oftentimes talk and speak just fine. They might sometimes use words or things a little bit differently. They have trouble with non-literal language. So things like, if you say, I'm trying to think of a good phrase, but like, people in glass houses don't throw stones. They might have trouble understanding what that means. But they actually oftentimes do speak and can speak and do a pretty good job communicating verbally, as long as you're willing to take a step back and clarify things with them.
Wow. Again, another really extensive answer, but I think it sheds so much light, because no, you're perfect. Because I think part of the problem is that, we don't, everybody's not trained like you. Everybody's not a doctor. Everybody's not a specialist in these kinds of areas. So we could easily miss things or misdiagnose, just misunderstand what's actually going on. So this is why people like you are so important.
Thanks. And Matty, I think I'll tell you too. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think that's a great point, especially about the misdiagnosis, because one thing I like to put out in the air and put up there is that, there is a history in this country of medical doctors not always understanding where Black kids are coming from, right? And one of the things we know is, in the past, autism spectrum disorder has been oftentimes misdiagnosed as intellectual disability or some kind of a disruptive behavior problem, because people didn't understand what was going on, right? And
Right.
the research really shows us at this point that one thing that happens is that Black families oftentimes report the developmental concerns, like my child isn't talking, or I'm worried that my child isn't making friends, right? Those kind of things. But they don't always report the full behaviors or the extent of those social difficulties. My suspicion is a lot of that is because of mistrust and fear, right? But what happens is it means that the diagnosis gets missed, and the doctors end up saying this is a learning problem, or this is ADHD, or this is disruptive behavior disorder. We at Metro Health in our clinic are trying really hard to make sure we're not perpetuating those misdiagnoses or those misunderstandings. But I think it's really important for the public to know that that exists and that that's out there, so that they know, they can say to their doctor, you know what, I understand what you're hearing from me, but I want to tell you the other pieces of what's concerning me for my child. Because I think that's going to be a really important step also, is for us to start thinking about how are we not communicating the right things to each other, and how does that mistrust affect a relationship with the patient, and as providers, what do we need to do to change that relationship? I
Wow.
hope
And
that makes sense.
that makes perfect sense. And a
Great.
lot of the reps that I've spoken to over the year plus couple of years now with Metro Health, kind of go back to that part of there being a mistrust between Black and brown people and just doctors in general. So I'm glad that you explained that. And you kind of touched on this, but if you can just kind of narrow it down here, what services does Metro Health provide related to ASD?
Yep. Absolutely. So the first thing we provide are autism diagnostic evaluations, and we actually do that for the age span. So kids as young as 18 months of age can be diagnosed with autism. So 18 months through the lifespan, we diagnose in clinics. We have special clinics that are made for individuals who are from Spanish speaking homes and for school age children, which are things that are a little bit harder to find in the Cleveland area. So those are two big things. We also have psychiatry services, autism primary care services, and we're really proud, we're working on building a comprehensive transition program for individuals with autism who are 15 and up. And this includes looking at things like job skills and working in the community, building friendships, being able to navigate things that you have to do every day, like going to the grocery store or riding the bus, being able to, connect with your spiritual communities or the other communities around you that are important to you. And we're doing that in combination with a couple of local and national partners, and are really excited about the opportunity that it could provide for Clevelanders.
Very well said, and a lot of very, very good information. So again, she's Dr. Armstrong-Brine. Of course, today we talked about the autism spectrum disorder behaviors and stigmas. And if for any follow-up or for more information in general, you can call 440-592-3740 or go to the website metrohealth.org/pediatric/autism-assessment-clinic, which is a mouthful, but we will include it into our caption for sure. Dr. Armstrong-Brine, thank you so much. Again, a lot of really good information here that I enjoy these conversations because I always learn something, like literally I always learn something, and it just opens my eyes in a different way to kind of look at things in a different way. And I hope that same thing happens for our followers and our listeners. So is there anything else that you'd like to add before we get out of here?
Nothing I can think of, but thank you so much for having me. I appreciate this chance to talk to everybody.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Till next time, I'm sure we'll talk again. And I hope that the rest of your week goes well. And I hope we get that sunshine that you were promising us at the beginning of this video. So that's another episode of Wellbeing Wednesday with Matty Willz. We'll see all you guys soon. Thanks.